Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. You have to make me Hare Krishna. So we are ready now? We should be. इंडिया तो भूल ही गया. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, Hare Krishna. Are we live now? Should we start? Okay. Hare Krishna. Thank you all for joining us for today evening. Just within a quick second, our team is just starting the presentation. Just give me a quick second. What has to be done? So, participants, okay? Co-host. Okay. Hare Krishna. So, can I start now? So, fine enough. Okay. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today evening Gita lesson session. I hope you are able to see and hear us. So we'll begin with the prayers and then we'll start our session. Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyatai Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So thank you for joining us for today evening session. And we'll start with our Gita essence, subject that we have been discussing from last couple of weeks. So which is an overview of Bhagavad Gita, and it is based on Srila Prabhupada's teachings. So today we're going to start with our discussion of 14th chapter. However, before we begin with starting a discussion of 14th chapter, let us do a quick recap of what we discussed in 13th chapter and how the 13th chapter is connected with 14th chapter. because of conversation, and there should be some connection in that sense. So 13th chapter, as we discussed yesterday, it is centered around um, six questions. Six questions that were asked by Arjuna. First question: what is Kshetra? Second question: what is Kshetragya? Third question: Jnanam. Fourth: Gneyam. And fifth and sixth: Purusha and Prakriti. Kshetra, Krishna says, the field of activity means the body. Kshetragya refers to Atma and also Paramatma. Jnanam means the process of knowledge. How do we understand the subject? And Gneyam refers to the object of knowledge, which means what do we want to understand? What is the conclusion? What is the key subject we want to understand? And the Gneyam refers to understanding about Atma and Paramatma. And finally, there was a discussion on Purusha and Prakriti. Now, what is Purusha and what is Prakriti? Prakriti means to be enjoyed, whereas Purusha means one who enjoys. So if you remember in 7th chapter, verse number 4th and 5th, particularly 5th verse of 7th chapter, Krishna describes there are two energies of mind. One is called superior, another is called inferior energy. What is a superior and inferior energy? Krishna called Jivatmas as a superior energy, whereas material creation or nature to be his inferior energy. So, as a Jivatma being a superior energy, we can exploit, we can use this material nature or the energy of the Lord for our sense gratification or for our own fulfillment of, for gratifying our own objectives. So, here in this very important section, Purush and Prakriti, Lord Shri Krishna describes that it is not that you are the Purush. In fact, there is only one Purush, Param Purush, that is Bhagwan, Lord Shri Krishna, or Param Ishwar. Being a superior energy, we are also have a little bit of ability I would say, a little bit of independence to exploit. But what point Lord Shri Krishna tries to bring out through this discussion is that actually you are not an independent controller. You are a dependent controller. And therefore, Lord Shri Krishna says, this is 13th chapter, verse number 22, although you are my energy, you are Jivatma, you are a superior energy, you are not independent controllers. You are dependent controller. There is only one independent controller, that is a supreme personality of Godhead. And Lord Shri Krishna says, Purusha prakriti stohi bhunkate prakriti jan gunan karanam gunasangasya sad asat yoni janmashu. In essence, this verse explains how a living entity, when he tries to enjoy Prakriti, he gets trapped by Prakriti or entangled by Prakriti. In essence, this verse says that living entity with a superior energy of Lord, when he tries to enjoy the inferior energy, which means the material nature, with a desire to enjoy, when he approaches the material nature, then he gets entangled. He gets trapped into the clutches of the material energy. So this is what Lord Shri Krishna said in 13th chapter, that a living entity is not independent. So when we were discussing this subject yesterday, we had discussed about 4 key components in this. Who is the enjoyer? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do we suffer? Who is responsible for it? And we had also talked about where is our freedom? Are we really free? Do we really have that freedom? What does freedom means? Whatever I desire, I should be able to achieve and attain. Yes or no? But most of the time, it doesn't happen like that. Very rarely, I would say, rather happens. And the fourth subject we discussed in this context yesterday was 3 doers. Although we had discussed that in the 5th chapter, but again, 3 doers, where our desires to get fulfilled, it depends on the sanction of the Lord, and the sanctions of the Lord depends on our own past karma, good or the bad. And then Lord, based on our past activities, karmic account balance, if he sanctions, then he directs to the material nature, Prakriti, to provide the facilities and resources for us to fulfill our desires. Simple example that we had given you while discussing from 5th chapter about 3 doers is like that of a person who wants to buy a car. He's working very hard, but suddenly it's this particular year he gets a promotion or maybe a bonus amount, and he has enough funds now with him, with which he can purchase a car. So now the idea is the desire have got sanctioned, although he had been desiring for all these years. But this particular time or year of his life, his desire was sanctioned by the Lord. Therefore, he got a bonus. Maybe his bank loan got sanctioned and things like that. And then Lord directs the material nature, which arranges the facilities and resources. So in this chapter 14 now, Lord Shri Krishna would describe in detail that how this living entity is bound by this material nature. And what is this three modes of material nature, which at least I feel is the most fascinating subject matter of this Bhagavad Gita. And the interesting part is anyone can relate to it, everyone can understand it. Being an atheist or a atheist doesn't matter. So with that, let's get into the chapter 14. Let's start with the discussion. The title of this chapter is Modes of Material Nature, wherein Lord Shri Krishna introduces a very fascinating subject matter of the mode that influences almost everything about our existence. And also in this chapter, Lord Shri Krishna clarifies one of the most common misconceptions that we have. And one of the most common misconception that we carry is, I am the doer and I am the controller. So here Lord Shri Krishna debunks this idea. Once a sadhu, a saintly person, had to visit a hospital. And the head doctor, or the chief doctor of that hospital, was an atheist. He didn't believe in the existence of God. He think, I am the doer and I am the controller. So this person came in contact with the sadhu, a saintly person, and began to discuss the subject matter of existence of God. And he went on saying again and again, God doesn't exist, God doesn't exist, and he kept on giving his vague reasons for it. And Sadhu patiently heard. After he was done with his rant, then Sadhu asked, my dear sir, you say you are the controller. And the doctor said, yes. What is the evidence of it? Sadhu asked. And the doctor said, well, who says Krishna is involved or the Lord is involved in our life? I am the doctor. When a patient comes to this hospital, it is I who decides whose life would be saved. So Sadhu said, so which means you think you are the one who saves the life? Doctor very proudly said, yes, I am the one. And Sadhu asked, my dear sir, has ever any patient died in a hospital? Now Sadhu for a second got a little surprised. He said, what kind of question is this? Of course, some people survive, some patients survive, and some patients die. What's the problem with it? And then Sadhu said immediately, it means you are a killer. Because when you can claim that you protect, then it means you also must be deciding whom to kill. And when Sadhu spoke like this, and suddenly it struck to a doctor, is actually correct. I am the doer and the controller. Although my ignorance and day-to-day activity happen to prove it to me that as if I am the controller. So here and through this chapter and discussion, Lord Shri Krishna will debunk, will clarify this misconception and help us understand that how we are like a puppet. I believe most of you might have seen the puppet show. We are like a puppets in the unseen, invisible hands of the puppeteer. And who are these puppeteers? That the subject matter will discuss or describe ahead. Before we proceed ahead, let me put forward a small case study to all of you. Imagine you're stuck in a traffic jam. How would you respond if you're stuck in a traffic jam? So this is, you have a chat enabled. Maybe you can just type in a chat box. I hope chat is enabled. So how would you respond? And let's say you have been stuck in a traffic for last 10 minutes. So I would request our host may read out the responses. So we'll get to know what our audience have responded on. The idea is you will see all of us, most of us, would react differently. Somebody may say, I probably would not mind. I would stay cool and calm. Other may say, I would get really disturbed and agitated. Someone may say, I may get angry. Third person may say, or the fourth person may say, well, who cares? Life goes on like this. Are we getting different kind of responses? So I don't know how to show you the responses here, but those who are on Zoom, they can see. Those on YouTube probably cannot see it. So that's the whole point of it. We all are giving different responses. Now, according to modern science, we are made up of almost more or less chemical composition. Yes or no? If yes, aren't we supposed to react in a similar manner? Agreed or no? Right in front of my eyes, there's a camera kept here. The camera is supposed to act in a certain manner. When you switch on the camera, it is supposed to switch on. It is not supposed to switch it off. But look at us humans, we give different responses in a similar situation. So here's my open-ended question to all of you. Why all of us give different responses to a similar situation? I'm not talking about different situation, different responses. And that the subject matter would clarify. So Krishna says, everyone is a puppet in the hands of large external energy, which means being controlled by the modes. So what are these modes? So here we'll just introduce the subject matter of modes. So what are these modes? First point, these qualities, modes also refers to guna. In Sanskrit, it means guna. You can also call it as a rope which ties us. So Krishna says, these qualities permeate everything about us, which means how we think, how we act, what we eat, how we dress, how we speak, everything, our lifestyle, our attitude and behaviors, everything fall under these modes. And through closer analysis, if you think about it, even at this point of time, you can perceive, you can understand how actually people are acting differently. And how they're acting differently, when we're going to study this subject matter more in detail today about the modes, then you will see, yes, everyone is acting differently because there are different modes are acting on them. Third, Krishna says, thus everyone is trapped in this material world. In other words, unless one is able to get out of the clutches of this modes of material nature, or I should put it this way, till the time we have this desire to enjoy separately out of the relationship with the Supreme Lord, till the time we have this understanding and idea of the life that I am the enjoyer, independent controller, where we disregard our eternal mother and father, till that time we remain under the clutches of these modes of material nature. So how do we come out of the influences of these modes of material nature? Because these modes take away our freedom. These modes and influences of the mode do not allow us to act freely as I would like to act. Rather, it influences our behavior. That will show you in a short while. So in seven chapters prior to 14 chapters, in seventh chapter, in verses number 14, Lord Shri Krishna spoke about the subject matter. Oops, I went ahead. And Krishna said, Devihi esha gunamai mama maya duratya. Krishna says, everyone, every living entity in this world is bound by my external energy. Gunamai mama maya duratya is very, very difficult to overcome. So who can overcome or who can set himself free from these ropes or these gunas? Krishna says, only that person. Maam evaya prapadyante mayam etam tanate. One who takes my shelter, only that person can cross beyond this modes of material nature. So let's begin with our chapter 14. This was a little introduction to the subject. And let's define an acronym as we do for every session. Acronym for this chapter is TRAP, where T stands for three modes. So this is from verse number 1 to 9. And here Lord Shri Krishna begins to describe, Lord Krishna starts the subject matter by defining the relationship between the material nature, Jiva, and Param Ishwar. Here, Lord Shri Krishna in the third verse explains, in the third verse of this 14th chapter, Lord Shri Krishna describes that material nature is like a mother, which means just like a mother gives a body, we are born, which means our mother has given us a body. Similarly, it is a material nature which gives the body to all the living entities, which means Atma. It is a material nature which gives a body to the living entity. Therefore, material nature is called as mother. So who is the father? Lord Shri Krishna explains that in the fourth verse of 14th chapter. Sarva yonishu kanteya murtaya samvantiya tasham brahma mahadayonir Aham bij pradha pita. And Lord Shri Krishna says, I am, aham, I, bij pradha pita, I am the seed-giving father. I impregnate the material nature by which all the jivatmas are born into this material creation. So, a little bit of recap. We are talking about we all living entities appearing in this material world. So, does anyone remember what Lord Shri Krishna describes about material world in chapter 8 of Bhagavad Gita? So, we have a question for all of you here. Can we publish a poll? So, what does Lord Shri Krishna speaks about material world in the 8th chapter? And the options that you have, that Krishna defines this material world as a place of happiness, or place of eternity, or place of suffering, and it's temporary, or all of the above. So you may take a few seconds and can give back the answer. So answer is going on.
Okay.
So most of them have attempted.
Yeah. So 94% are saying place of suffering and it is temporary.
Okay, Hare Krishna. So yes, correct. If you all remember correctly, Lord Shri Krishna defines this world as a place of dukhalayam and ashashvatam. So we had discussed this in 8th chapter, and we're not going to go into details of it, why Lord Shri Krishna calls this place to be Dukhalayam, Ashashvatam, and all that, and what is the idea of this. In essence, Lord Shri Krishna compares this material world to a prison house. And during that 8th chapter discussion, we discussed why it is called prison house and what's the purpose. The purpose is to purify ourselves, our anathas, and all those things. And it's also a place of suffering. Why? Birth, death, old age, and disease, all that we have discussed. So I'm not going to focus on that aspect. So let's focus on the aspect of, in this context of the 14th chapter. Can we just pause for a quick second? Yeah, just pause for a quick second. Hare Krishna. Take my video up. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So the team, please let us know when we are ready. Okay. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Okay, so are we good to go and start with? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama. Hare Rama, Hare. Okay, so can we start now? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Can we start presentation now? Are we live? A little technical glitch here. हरे कृष्णा. All right, so रुकावट के लिए खेद है. दूरदर्शन का प्रसारण जारी रहेगा. Okay, let's focus on the subject matter again. This material world is compared to prison house, and we talked about it. So now you might all wonder, hey, how is this place called as a prison house? I don't see any prison walls. I'm a free living entity. I can move, walk around anywhere. Or maybe you don't have that feeling today because of thanks to the COVID time, you all are caught up in your house. But otherwise, everyone may have a question. Why do we call this place as a prison house? So Lord Shri Krishna defines, how are we bound in this prison house? And this 14th chapter describes that we all are bound by the three chains, which means three modes of material nature. So when a person thinks, oh, this is not a prison house, I can, even if it is a prison house, because I'm not bound in any walls here, I can run away. So Krishna says, no, you cannot run away. Just like a ship tied with a rope cannot run away, cannot move freely. Similarly, we all living entities are so tightly bound by these three modes of material nature, or the three ropes, we cannot set ourselves free because our hands and legs are all tied up. Unless someone else who is freed from the influence of modes of material nature comes and sets us free, we cannot set ourselves free. And that's the whole idea. So in 14th chapter, verse number 5, Lord Shri Krishna describes these three modes. Sattvam rajastama iti guna prakriti sambhava nibadhananti mahabhaho dehi dehinam apyayam. And Lord Shri Krishna defines there are three kinds of modes, three types: sattva, raja, and tamagun. Now, what is this goodness and passion and ignorance? To give you a simple example, the person who is influenced by mode of goodness generally thinks of a long-term goal. And for that long-term goal, he is willing to undergo temporary inconveniences, which means he may have to a little bit accept some suffering today, but eventually he lives a happy life. Whereas those who are greatly influenced, predominantly influenced by mode of passion, they have short-term goals. They want to gratify right now. And often, in this hurry of enjoying life right now, they end up suffering. That's mode of passion. What is mode of ignorance is characterized by? No long term, no short term, nothing works for them. They're always suffering. They're always miserable. That is a mode of ignorance. So, my question to all of you is, which one is better according to you? Which chain would you be preferred to tied up with? A chain of goodness, chain of passion, or chain of ignorance? These modes are also compared to gold chain, silver chain, and iron chain. So which chain would you like? Sone ki, chande ki, or iron? Lohe ki, lohe ki. What our guests are saying? Which chain they are preferring? Suna hai sona bahut महंगा hai. So probably generally people will say, हाँ तो सोने की chain, right? Okay. But the best part is Lord Shri Krishna says, I will tell you the secret by which you can set yourself free. Because tying up with any chain is a bondage. And living entity is meant to live a life of freedom and independence. So let's do a quick analysis of the modes, which is described by Lord Shri Krishna in the follow-up verses. And we'll cover these 3 points. Symptoms, according to goodness, passion, ignorance, how it influences us, and some examples. So to begin with, we'll start with a case study. And it's a case study of a cap seller. Once upon a time, the 3 cap sellers, they went to, they would go to sell their caps to a different village. And while going through that journey on the way, it was pretty sunny, it was hot, so they decided, why don't we take a rest? And they found a huge tree, and under the shade of the tree, they decided to keep the bag of the cap nearby, and they decided to take a rest. So these 3 people were of the names of goodness, passion, and ignorance. 3 brothers. One name is goodness, second is passion, third is ignorance. They all went there and they took rest. Now, they're not simultaneously together. One day, ignorance did this, another day, passion, third day, goodness. So all 3 of them did the same thing. They went, took a rest underneath a tree, under the shade of the tree. And on that tree, there were many, many monkeys. And when the monkeys saw that this cap seller is sleeping underneath the tree, for this cap seller, all his days' livelihood, in fact, for his week's livelihood, in terms of his what he's going to eat and everything, would depend on his once in a week journey to other village, where all his hard work in the form of a cap he would sell, get some money, and run his family for the next 1 week. So it's a very important thing. Now the monkeys attack the sleeping cap seller, and they take all the caps away from this cap seller. And after a while, the cap seller woke up, and he opened his eyes and he saw, oh my goodness, none of my caps are here. So my question is, How did, of course, I'm not asking a question, I'm going to tell you because right now I can't ask a question. So we'll study that how these three brothers, ignorance, passion, and goodness, reacted to the situation, faced with the same situation. How did Tamogudi brother, Rajogudi Bhai, and Sattogudi Bhai reacted when they saw all their caps, the means of their livelihood for the next 1 week had been taken away? So the brother whose name was Ignorance, when he woke up, so how did he reacted? So when he woke up and when he saw his caps are missing, this person whose name was Ignorance, he began to scream, he began to cry, and in that despondency, he became totally hopeless. And crying and screaming, abusing the monkeys, he left that place, thinking that nothing can happen. This world is hopeless, my life is hopeless, everything is hopeless. He went away and decided to forget about his misery by going to a bar and drinking a wine or a glass of a beer. That's how the person whose name was Ignorance acted. Next day, the same thing happened with the brother whose name was Passion. And when he woke up, he saw all his caps had disappeared. How did this person by the name of Passion reacted? This person also got very angry. He abused and he looked here and there. What can I throw at the monkeys so that I can get the caps? And he saw stones and he started picking up stones and throwing at the monkeys. And he tried to hurt them. And in this whole attempt to hurt them, he got hurt, but he failed to get even a single cap because this is not how the monkeys function. So he also frustrated. His all attempts were futile. He got frustrated. He also left away. And the third day, the similar incident happened with the brother whose name was Goodness. When he woke up and he realized that all the caps had been stolen away, he began to think, how can I get my means of livelihood back? With a cool and calm head, he began to think how I can take the caps back from the monkeys. And then he realized monkeys, they are imitators. They like to imitate. And then this person whose name was Goodness, he had one cap with him, which he had kept in his pocket because that's the cap he was wearing. So he took out that cap from his pocket. He waved it to the monkeys. So monkeys also did that. Wherever the monkeys were holding the cap, they also took the cap and they started waving at this man. And then this man threw the cap away. And as soon as this man threw the cap away, all the monkeys, being a good imitators, threw their caps. And all the caps fell on the ground, and this man went around, picked up all the caps, and went away. And this is how the brother whose name was Goodness acted. And actually, these three brothers are nothing, but they represent three gunas. The person who has this predominance of goodness, he would have this calm, creative thinking, where he would think about how to find a solution, and he would be successful. Whereas a person for whom mode of passion is predominant, he will make hue and cry, he'll become violent and all that. He may get success, may not get success. Whereas for the person who is in ignorance, he will simply cry and complain, but would not work towards finding a solution. And this is the essence of it. So what is the lessons we learned from this particular small case study that we discussed? And the lesson is, we don't have control on the situations. Yes or no? We all agree? We don't control the situations. Nobody thinks that I would like to be stuck in a traffic. We get stuck in a traffic. Nobody expected this lockdown, but we are put into the situation, isn't it? So we don't have control on situations, but we do have control on our responses. And through this case study of three brothers of goodness, passion, ignorance, we saw how these three gave different responses. So the question comes, how is our response determined? Or what determines our response? All the three brothers were faced with similar situations, but they responded differently. Why? Because of different influences of the modes. So a person who has this predominance of goodness in him, he would be, calm, and he would do proper analysis before reacting. In other words, if he has to speak something, he will think twice. He'll be careful about it, how my words, how my action would produce a result. Whereas for a passion, where the person has predominance of passion, is agitated, and generally they're highly reactive. So mode of goodness person is proactive, and the mode of passion person is reactive. And mode of ignorance person, no action only. He just, there will be panic, there will be confusion, there will be fear, and he will say, no, 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 I can't do anything. I should give up. So this whole idea where people say, I give up, the way the people have this societal thoughts, I quit. This all indicates that this person is greatly influenced by tamoguna. Now you may wonder, Prabhu, fine. Okay, I may understand that right now I have this tamoguna prominently, rajoguna prominently, sattvaguna prominently. How does it affect my life today? And that's the beauty of this discussion. Once we identify in which mode we are functioning, then Krishna ahead gives us the solutions also, how we can change our modes. And that is how, in whichever place and situation we are today, we can become or we can lead a successful life just by learning the secret of how to change our modes from tamogun to rajagun and rajagun to sattvagun. Because sattvagun is a platform of a living where a person is calm, peaceful, and content. That's the idea about it. So let's consider some of the qualities of people who are influenced by mode of goodness. And then at the end of this discussion, you can let us know if you have ever known people in mode of goodness, mode of passion, and mode of ignorance quality. So we'll get to know you're able to relate to the subject. So let's take a look at it. So those who are in mode of goodness, they're the people who have knowledge. They're peaceful and happy. They see things in right perspectives. They have calm, clear, and creative thinking. Last but not the least, such the influence of mode of goodness helps them to find an effective solution to life's problem. They are the one who are visionary. They generally think of a long-term solution rather than short-term solution. What about the person who is in passion? A person who's prominently has mode of passion, they're too attached to name, fame, recognition. They're very greedy, they're over ambitious. Whatever they get in their life, they still say, Ye dil mange more. That's their mantra of their life. They are workaholic, and suddenly they wake up to find themselves at the edge of burnout because they work, because they have to acquire more wealth, more possessions. Because of this, there is a high sense of competitiveness, because if you're greedy, there's going to be competitiveness. And if there's competitiveness, there's going to be envy. So they are by natural, they're envious, competitive, they are hasty, very much self-centered. And one of the prominent quality of mode of passion is bhoga aishwarya, which means they're attached to sense gratification in terms of towards wealth and towards opposite sex. Very strong appetite for that. And for a person in this mode, for such a person, it's very difficult to focus on anything. The mind is so agitated, it always keeps wavering. Sounds familiar? Have you met somebody whose mind is generally disturbed? Okay, all right. And what about the quality of ignorance? This person is the most peaceful person in the world because he never wakes up. He's always lazy. He's always crazy. And he's always oversleeping. So, by the way, that was a sarcasm. He's not peaceful. He's completely hopeless. He spends his life indulging in intoxication, drugs, smoking, and finds that things to be a great satisfaction. This is almost equivalent to putting your mouth on the exhaust pipe of a car, right? The car gives you smoke, and you take smoke. And if there is a joy in this, that is what tamoguna quality. He loves procrastination, always keeps on postponing. Sounds familiar? Procrastination, a little bit. Depressed, lonely, confused, insecure is one of the prominent quality here. Always fearful, and he's always dependent on others for his happiness. And these are some of the prominent attributes of a person who's in mode of ignorance. For him, body is the self, and sense gratification is the ultimate goal of life. So to give you a very simple example, so you can remember these three qualities of goodness, passion, ignorance, we'll give you an example of three brothers from the history of our Vedic literatures. where these three brothers predominantly identify mode of goodness, mode of passion, and ignorance. Any ideas who are these three very famous brothers? Their birth anniversary or death anniversary is just about to happen in this month. Who are these? Yes, Ravana, Kumbhakarna, Vibhishan. दशहरा आ रहा है ना? दशहरा क्या है? What is दशहरा? Death anniversary, na? That's what I'm saying, death anniversary. It's the death of Ravana, right? Of course, Kumbhakarna died long ago. Prior to that, fine. So, it's a question to all of you. You have three brothers, Ravana, Kumbhakarna, and Vibhishan. So, who represents goodness, passion, and ignorance? Let's see how much you have understood. Can we have some chat here going on? Oh, we can see chat there also? Yes. Okay, fine. Let's continue. So I hope you are able to give an answer. So goodness is represented by Ravan. So peaceful and content he was, isn't it? I hope you're not signing out from the session right now. Otherwise, you'll be getting a wrong lesson. That was a joke. Goodness is represented by Vibhishan. Passion, Ravana. He kidnapped Mother Sita, attracted to opposite sex. And his desire to acquire possession and wealth had no limits. And Kumbhakarna, he loved to sleep. Sounds familiar? Little bit? So, yeah, that's what mode of ignorance. So, here's my question to all of you. Do you know any person who you can identify in these three particular modes? In goodness, passion, and ignorance? Any? You can see? Okay, I know you might be thinking, Prabhu, we know people where these three modes are acting simultaneously. If that's the case, that would be our next subject matter. Yes, we are not in pure goodness, passion, ignorance. Rather, these three modes are always battling to take a predominance. And according to the time and situation, whichever mode is predominant on us, like that, we give a response. So how do we respond? That's what the question I started with. And we gave an example of a story of a cap seller. Our response is directly influenced by the mode by which we are predominantly influenced at that particular situation. So that's the point here. So here, let's take the subject matter a little more into context of all of us. How do leaders function in these modes, or in three modes? All of us, Lord Shri Krishna in third chapter says, Yat yad achrati shreshtas tat tat eva taro jana. In other words, Krishna says, whatever a leader does is what everyone else do. So in all of us, in our capacity, some capacity, we all are leader. You may be a team leader. You may have some people under you. You may be a mother or a father, a team lead for the family, right? That's the point here. Similarly, in different roles. So let's take a look at it. So let's begin with what happens when a leader is situated in Tamoguna. So these are some points for you to see. I'll not be able to go in details, but I have just noted on for all of you. If a leader has a predominance of Tamoguna, by the way, you don't want to have a leader in Tamoguna nor in Rajaguna. There is also a subject of discussion called personality types. I have excluded this because then you can't finish the discussion, but maybe sometime in future we can talk about personality types which are determined based on this three modes and their interactions. So let's take a focus on the leadership here. If a leader is in mode of ignorance, he's often tired. His fatigue is mixed with nervousness, insecurity, tension, anxiety. Often, such a person would have a sense of inferiority complex, and he would feel or she would feel life being a burden. Depression may get triggered once in a while, and he would go through mood swings. We call it, right? Undesirable moods. Negative thoughts are very common to him, and dysfunctional behavior where he's forced to take medicines to alter his behavior. Of the drugs that people take just to control their behavior. Let's look at some more features. He is not pleasant, and often there is a self or less esteem. Okay, this I already described. Oh, I had already described this. Second, what happens when a leader has predominance of passion, or you have a passionate leader? Now, passion is greatly today glorified in all our education media, yes or no? Passion is my life. Passion is my dream. Outside the office place, workplace, you see the passion, the big passion. Be a passionate worker. Have you seen those notice boards? So just be careful what happens when you're a passionate worker. I mean, that's what we're going to talk about right now here. Okay. So such a person is a stress driven. Now, being under stress is not bad, but being under overstress is bad. How to deal with stress is a separate subject matter. That's a different subject. But they are always in stress by almost pleasant sense of excitement and power because they're always hankering for that. His physical energy feels high even though he may face high levels of stress. He tends to be impatient, which means rash, and can push himself towards one objective after another, rarely pausing to rest or reflect. In other words, they're really in mood of achieving more and more and more, as I was saying before. And later on, sometime in their life, they may wake up in the morning finding themselves at the edge of their life because they have overburnt themselves for working very, very hard. They are infused with moderate to severe level of physical tension. You know this physical pain the body develops because of stress. Stress and physical pain are interrelated, as doctor says. His ability to pay deep and genuine attention to his needs and other people needs and projects needs, which means blunt, which means if a person is in passion, he's generally is very insensitive. He's rash in his behavior, and his ability to empathize and to understand others' needs, interests, and concerns are rarely there. And is almost on the edge of burnout and exhaustion. So, what about the person or a leader who is in goodness? He feels low tension and high energy. Mode of passion, high tension, high energy. Here in mode of goodness, low tension, high energy. So Sattva Guna, it does not mean that you don't work. In Sattva Guna, you work, but you don't have that much tension. You work and you produce result effectively. Feels remarkably serene and have life under control, have situation under control. That is what we call as a proactive behavior, where you plan ahead of time. Replaces tense energy with an alert, more optimistic presence of mind, peaceful. He has pleasurable bodily feelings, deep sense of physical stamina, and well-being. In other words, such a person do not get agitated very easily. When he is faced with a challenge and crisis, just like a cap seller by the name of goodness, he could still with a calm and a creative mind think how to deal with that crisis. Not like in a person by the name of passion who started hurling abuses and picked up stones and started throwing stones at the monkeys. And definitely not like ignorance who just complained, cried, and ran away. That's the point here. He has a great mental and physical reserves and best combination of healthy vitality and so forth. In other words, he has to struggle less, which means low wear and tear. He lives longer and lives happily. That's the idea. So it is in our hand what we want to become. We want to become a leader in mode of goodness, a leader in mode of passion, a leader in mode of ignorance. So how does this choice comes to us, and how we can change this modes will be described just ahead. Prior to that, Arjuna began to think. And Arjuna thought, my dear Lord, do these modes act independently of other modes, or one mode becomes predominant of other modes? How do they interact? Or one person is in mode of goodness always, while other person is mode of passion always? Here, Lord Shri Krishna begins to answer, and that brings us to the second subject matter of this chapter, race for prominence, where in essence, Lord Shri Krishna explains that how these three gunas, they keep on competing with each other to take a prominence on an individual. Different times of the day, we all would have an experience. We have different sense of experience of energy within us. We have different mood swings. When we wake up early in the morning and then we go out and look at the sunrise, we feel energetic. Similarly, that person wakes up at 10 o'clock in the morning, although he might have slept 2 hours extra, he will feel tired and lazy. We have that experience. That's the whole point is. So how with, I mean, in other words, that's how the modes compete with each other. The question is, do the modes compete with each other on their own? How does one mode get prominence on us? Who decides? It is I who decides. That is what the privilege and leverage we have with us. That is how we can change the influence of modes. How, what kind of association we take, how we act, and how what kind of lifestyle we live, accordingly these modes becomes prominent. To give you an example, not that only our life, within our life everything is permeated by this modes. In fact, everything in this creation is under the influence of the modes, which means even the time, this 24 hours can be divided under the influence of three modes, which means certain hours of the day have a prominence of goodness, whereas other hours of the day have prominence of passion and ignorance. So what kind of activity we do in these time zones determines what mode of consciousness or the modes of matter nature we cultivate. So early morning hours, for example, early morning hours, Brahma Muhurta time, which means 2 hours before sunrise, up to the time of sunrise precisely, or let's say 1 hour after sunrise, is said to be the time of mode of goodness. Not after 1 hour after sunrise, up to the time of sunrise, is said to be the time of mode of goodness. How many of you have an experience, or let's say the other way around, how many of your parents used to tell you when you were a kid, my dear child, you should sleep early and wake up early, because when you wake up early, your mind would be fresh and you'll be able to learn and remember more. Please raise your hand. Well, those who are watching on Akashvani, maybe you can reply yes or no on the chat box because I cannot see you directly. Yes, that's the whole idea about it. Why parents used to say, until that point of time, some aspect of culture was remaining. Now that nothing is remaining. Even parents don't wake up early in the morning, right? Even parents don't wake up early in the morning. That's the whole point about it. So, goodness, early morning. And when that's the reason in all spiritual society, in all spiritual culture, morning time is given such a great emphasis where we all should practice spiritual culture, which means meditation, or the activities like reading and hearing early in the morning hours. When we do such kind of spiritual activities in the morning hours, then we are cultivating mode of goodness. But if we have wasted our early morning hours in sleeping, then what are you cultivating? Mode of ignorance. So how we act, once we get the knowledge about these modes and their influence and how they function on every kind of activity which we relate to, then we have the right to decide which mode we want to cultivate. Right now, I'm just speaking about time because this is not the end of the chapter. This is the beginning of the chapter. Ahead in chapter number 17, chapter number 18, there is a more detailed discussion about these modes in terms of your lifestyle, in terms of your knowledge, your charity, your eating habits. Everything are influenced by modes. And Sattva Guna have a particular eating habit, Rajoguna have a particular eating habit. And if you cultivate that eating habit, then we cultivate mode of goodness. That's the point here. And we know when the sunrise happens, suddenly our mind gets agitated, right? And the activity begins outside. That's the time of mode of passion. And when the sun sets, of course, these days, when the sunset is a time of awakening for great sages. I mean, Hare Krishna, all respect to everyone, but it's a time of awakening. I mean, at least, because I had spent a lot of years in the West, I remember 12 o'clock, first time when I had to go out, 12 o'clock in the night, I was shocked. And I was traveling somewhere else. I was standing there at 12 o'clock in the night. Just 5 minutes before 12 o'clock, the high street, which is called as the main area, high street right next to our college campus, was totally empty. And after 5 minutes, I turned around. It's so jam-packed. I couldn't believe from where all these zombies appear suddenly in the middle of the night. And that is called as a nightlife, which remains active until 4 o'clock in the morning. Just right, Brahma Muhurta time, they go to sleep. Lord Shri Krishna says, Ya Nisha Sarva Bhutani, right? Tasyam Jagrati Samyati, second chapter, I believe 69th verse. So that's the whole subject matter here. So our association, our activities determines what modes becomes predominant on us, and we have the privilege and right. So Arjuna began to think, my dear Lord, what is the result of our actions in this mode, which means if a person acts in a mode of goodness, what result does he get? Similarly for passion and ignorance. And here in this section, Lord Shri Krishna begins to talk about what are the actions in these different modes. And here also Lord Shri Krishna speaks about what is our next destination. Why? Because reincarnation is the process by which a soul acquires the next body. And this next body is determined on the kind of activities one has performed in the current life. And these activities are determined by the kind of modes, influenced of the modes we have on us. And that's the reason when Krishna is defining or talking about the activities, actions of the modes, he also talks about the next life, because they are interconnected in that sense. So here, Lord Shri Krishna predicts our next destination based on the influences of the modes. A person has lived his life in goodness, he gets higher destination. Those who have lived a life in mode of passion, they love work as worship, so they're sent back to IT companies, continue in IT companies, life after life. And those who have lived like hogs and dogs, perform sinful activity, that is an indication of tamoguna, they are sent to the hellish planets to their brothers and sisters, because that's what they wanted to live like. So they get a full-fledged association. So let's do an analysis of these modes in context of the results of action and next life. So what are the result of action of a person in ignorance, passion, and goodness, and also Shuddha Sattva, pure goodness, which is outside the scope of modes of material nature. So who is in this Shuddha Sattva, pure goodness? One who is firmly situated at the lotus feet of the Lord. Maam eva prapadyante, mayam etam tarantite. That's the point. So let's take a look. What about ignorance? What is the result of an action performed by a person who is in ignorance, mode of ignorance? Result, foolishness, madness, and illusion. He considers suffering to be happiness. So mode of ignorance and mode of goodness are antithesis, are opposite to each other. Goodness, living a pure life, is joyful living, and ignorance, pure life, is a suffering. Getting the point? In mode of goodness, people love to get up in the morning and chant the names of the Lord, but should the Lord, for the one who is in mode of ignorance, he hates this idea of waking up early in the morning. He thinks staying up whole night and sleeping in the early morning hours is a joy of life. Like that, they're entirely opposite. That's the meaning of illusion. Passion, some mental happiness, or more or less is misery. Just like a sex pleasure is a predominant function in this, which is described as giving you fleeting happiness, but somebody overindulges in it, then it leads to suffering and misery. And greed develops, because this mode of passion is characterized by unlimited desires and hankering. Once again, the mantra for a person is mode of passion is ye dil mange more. So here the greed develops, nothing can satisfy him. Whereas the person who is in goodness, when he acts, what are the results? Results of pious action are pious or pure, in which knowledge develops, enlightenment happens, and he becomes closer to the God if he's properly guided. But at least he is happy, he is away from the sinful life because he lives a pure life. Whereas a person performing action in Shuddha Sattva, where he knows who is he, who is the Lord, and what is the relationship between him, whatever action he performs, it leads him to self-realization. So, what do you think about your behavior? Let's do a 2 minutes exercise here. Think of your behavior, and I'll give you some options. Do you find yourself peaceful? Do you think you're always fresh, full of energy, have a sense of happiness, and you have a sense of helping others? Is that the predominance in you? If yes, you're in mode of goodness. Whereas if you feel like, no, I always have a sense of hankering, desire, I'm never content, and I always keep asking for more and more, and I often get frustrated and upset because all desires cannot be fulfilled. If that is what our situation predominantly, then mode of passion is predominantly on us. And third, if we feel that I'm always tired, drowsy, Although I sleep 8 to 10 hours in the night, but still as the day begins, I just hope, can I go and sleep again? That's a predominant thing. And the sinful things gives me more attraction, and the pious things repels me, then that represents or characterizes the influence of mode of ignorance, where I have hopelessness and a kind of an attitude where I don't care for anything and anyone except for what I want. So that's the idea in essence on the subject matter. When we generally discuss the subject matter of modes of material nature, I have an exercise where I give, but I can't do it online, where I help people understand what are the prominent modes in them. Where we have almost 50 characteristics, defining different behaviors where we have to judge. Maybe I can send it to you offline, you can solve it, and then we can discuss it maybe on one of the weekday sessions. So what is the next life? What is the next life the person receives? Lord Shri Krishna says, as I said in the beginning, those are ignorance, they go to lower planets. Which means lower life, the life in the animal kingdom or in the plant species of the birds of the beast. Whereas those who are in passion, they again take birth in this human kingdom or human life and planet Earth primarily. Whereas those who live their life in mode of goodness, the next life is in heavenly planets, higher planets, amongst the family of devatas and sages and so forth. And finally, we come to the last section of this discussion, where I'll just take 5 more minutes of your time for this chapter, where P stands for pure life. Here, the subject matter discussed in this pure life section is how can I change my modes of material nature? Well, in the beginning, as we discussed, by which chain would you like to be tied up? Gold chain, silver chain, iron chain. And the fact is, no chain. So the point which is discussed here is, how do I set myself free from this chains of bondage so I become a free living entity and can experience the joy? And once we are freed from these chains, we're also freed from the prison house, which means that's the time we can go back to eternal home, back to Godhead, the Lord Shri Krishna described in chapter 8. So, the last section. Power of conditioning is tremendous. Do I have a chance to become better? And this question is a question which probably might be running in everyone's mind right now. Do I have any chance to change myself? Well, Lord Srila Prabhupada gives a very beautiful purport about this in the 10th verse. Oh, how did it went ahead? Prabhupada says, if one wants, he can develop by practice the mode of goodness and thus defeat the mode of ignorance and passion. Although there are these three modes of material nature, if one is determined, he can be blessed by the mode of goodness. And by transcending the mode of goodness, he can be situated in pure goodness. As you see here, the activity in pure goodness, where Srila Prabhupada sitting in a Tompkins Square Park in New York and engaging everyone there and chanting of the holy names of the Lord. And Prabhupada says, this state of pure goodness is called Vasudeva state, a state in which one can understand the science of God. In other words, in order to be successful, one need to give up attachment to wrong things. One need to give attachment to wrong things and aversion to right things. Then only we can rise to the level of goodness and then to Shuddha Sattva. So how I think, speak and act will depend on how I endeavor to give up, how I endeavor to change myself. Our responses are determined by our modes of consciousness. So it depends on how I give up attachment to right things and how I give up aversion to right things. So what are the attachment to wrong things? There are 4 regulative principles of freedom that Lord Shri Krishna defines in the 2nd chapter. He calls regulative principles of freedom. Very interestingly, if you practice regulative principles, it takes you to freedom. What freedom? Freedom from the bondage of modes of material nature. And what are these regulative principles? No meat eating, no intoxication, no gambling, and no illicit relationship or sex for that reason. And what it should be replaced with? We discuss about ABCD. Let's focus here in this context of sattvic diet, which 17th chapter would describe, which means a vegetarian diet, fruits, milk, grains, and so forth. Best if we can start the practice of offering anything, everything that we eat to the Lord, then it becomes a karma-free diet. Sattvic dress. You might wonder why monks have to wear a single color dress 365 days a year, isn't it? Why monks have to shave their heads? The hairs are said to be the ornament of beauty. That's the reason in previous ages. Like, for example, Lord Shri Krishna, he had long hairs, so curly hairs. The long hairs is a sign of a beauty. So actually, it's no beauty, but it increases our bodily consciousness. We are the one who's speaking to everyone that give a body consciousness. So at least externally, we need to shave up ourselves, right? So that this aspect slowly reduces the tamaguna and rajaguna effect and increases sattva-guna effect. That's the idea about it. Simple dress, again, simple dress increases the influence of sattva-guna and reduces passion. Do you agree or not? The dresses also create passion and goodness. If you see somebody wearing a very flashy costume or maybe a short costume, it makes the mind agitated. Sattvic environment, taking out time to meditate on God and being contemplated about ultimate purpose of life. And the foremost and most important is sattvic association, company of saintly people and saintly literature. Again, A, B, C, D. These are just subsets of those ABCD practice. And very important, and the last subject matter, where Srila Prabhupada talks about the role of ISKCON in revolutionizing the consciousness of people and helping people rise up to the level of goodness. So why ISKCON is needed? Srila Prabhupada writes in his own words. I'll read out as Prabhupada says. Since the present civilization is not very congenial to the living entities, Krishna consciousness is recommended. Though Krishna conscious society will develop the mode of goodness, when the mode of goodness is developed, people will see things as they are. In the mode of ignorance, people are just like animals and cannot say things clearly. Whereas in the mode of ignorance, for example, they do not see that by killing one animal, they're taking the chance of being killed by the animal in the next life. Because people have no knowledge in actual knowledge, have no education in actual knowledge, they become irresponsible. Prabhupada further writes, to stop this irresponsibility, education for developing the mode of goodness of the people in general must be there. When they're actually educated in the mode of goodness, they'll become sober, full of knowledge, and they will see things as they are. People will be happy and prosperous. Even if the majority of the people aren't happy and prosperous, Prabhupada says even a certain percentage of people take to Krishna consciousness, through which they can very easily cultivate mode of goodness, still the whole world would be at peace. And there would be a prosperity all over the world. Otherwise, if the world is devoted to the mode of passion and ignorance, there cannot be any peace or prosperity. How much ever United Nations holds meeting, how much ever World Health Organization thinks about the health of every living entity. Of course, they don't think about every living entity. They only think about the well-being of humans, also of that nations where they have an agenda. It's all partition kind of politics. So Prabhupada says here, if the world has predominance of passion, ignorance, there will always be conflict. Even in this time of COVID, you know that there are conflict even on the India's eastern and western horizon, right? On the borders. There's a conflict all over the time. In the mode of passion, people become greedy. We know our neighbor, what's going on with the neighbor right now. I'm not speaking about my neighbor. So I'm speaking of the neighbor of our country. And their hankering for sense enjoyment has no limits. One can see that even if one has enough money and adequate arrangements for sense gratification, there's no happiness, nor peace of mind. That is not possible because one is situated in the mode of passion. If one wants happiness at all, His money will not help him. He has to elevate himself to the mode of goodness. How? By practicing Krishna consciousness. When one is engaged in the mode of passion, not only is he mentally unhappy, but his profession and occupation are also very troublesome. How many of you are dissatisfied with your professional life? All right. I didn't ask you to raise your hands, but still you raised, that's all right. He has to devise so many plans and schemes to acquire enough money to maintain his status quo. This is all miserable. This is one of the golden purpose of Prabhupada. In the mode of ignorance, people become mad, being distressed by their circumstances. They take shelter of intoxication, meat eating, gambling, illicit relationship, and so forth, and they further sink into ignorance. Their future in life is very dark. 14th chapter, 17th verse purport. Next purport and the concluding purport. There is an opportunity for men in the modes of ignorance and passion to be elevated to the mode of goodness. It doesn't matter where you had been. What matters is what we do next. And that system of making a progress to mode of goodness is called as Krishna consciousness. But one who does not take advantage of this opportunity will certainly continue in the lower modes. Like this, Srila Prabhupada explains the importance of ISKCON to this world, to the society, and how ISKCON is playing a very crucial role. In conclusion, Lord Shri Krishna says, Mamachayo vicharena bhakti yogena sevate saguna samiti etan brahma bhuyaya kalpite. One who engages in full devotional service unto me at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman, which means level of Atma. And that is what we just saw Srila Prabhupada describing in the purport. If you want to live a happy and prosperous life, Krishna consciousness is the way, and that is the means. And that's the reason Srila Prabhupada dedicated his life to give us happy and a prosperous future. To conclude, a very meaningful prayer that I really like, which I would like to share with all of you. All of you, if you like, may recite after me. Let's, to save time, let's read out together at the go of 3. 1, 2, and 3. O Lord, give me the courage to change the things which can and ought to be changed, the serenity to accept the things which cannot be changed, and the wisdom to know the difference. Hare Krishna. A very, very potent prayer to give us the power of discrimination to understand what is in my capacity and what is not in my capacity. You kindly take care of it and help change that situation so I can serve you and I can live a better life. In essence, what are the key learnings from this very, very important subject matter? Although I don't think so I did a good justice to it because we couldn't do much exercise, but still whatever in the given time frame we could discuss. We can perceive how people are functioning in this world with a mistaken belief of free will. Yes? Do you agree with this now? Are you all able to see how everyone is influenced by different modes of material nature? Goodness, passion, ignorance, or their combinations? Yet everyone think, I am the doer, I am the controller. In actuality, we are impelled to act according to these influences. The state of freedom begins when we transcend these modes of nature. Not 1947 did not give you freedom. When we transcend these modes of nature, will give us the freedom. Of course, there was one level of freedom at a social level, but at a personal level, we still are in bondage. Or else, if we don't gain freedom, or else these modes of material nature will act to perpetually trap one in this material world. And that's the essence of this 14th chapter. With this, we thank you all for joining us for today evening and attending this session. We'll continue this discussion on Bhagavad Gita next week. There are 2 more weeks remaining before we conclude our Bhagavad Gita, and the 3rd week we'll have the last session overview and a concluding session by His Grace Radheshyam Prabhu for all of us for this. So with that, thank you so much. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki and Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai. Hare Krishna. If there is any questions or anything for me, I will request our host to take a lead and please guide us on that.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, please.
Prabhuji, thank you for the wonderful class. And we have one question on YouTube. So Shriya Deshpande, she is asking, what is the difference between the goodness and pure goodness?
Yeah, we discussed. Hare Krishna. Okay. You need to switch off the sounds. Hare Krishna. Am I audible now?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, great. That makes it easy. So, as we discussed, even pure goodness binds us. It does not set us free. The peculiarity, the particular feature, a distinct feature of mode of goodness is it gives you a sense of contentment, where you think, okay, my life is all good. I need not endeavor for anything. But still, you're under the clutches of modes of material nature. A person who is in mode of goodness, if he's situated in mode of goodness, for him to accept spiritual life at times becomes very challenging because he does not see any need. You know, when you're sick, you go to a doctor. When you understand that you're suffering in this world, or when you recognize this world is a place of suffering, as Krishna says, then you look for a solution to come out of it. Whereas for a person in goodness, he thinks life is all good. I have enough money. I have a good family with me. I have a good profession. Life is going on. I don't need anything else in my life. And that becomes a bottleneck, and because of which, although he's in mode of goodness, he's situated in some knowledge, not necessarily spiritual knowledge, it could be a mundane knowledge, but because he's not looking at what's going to happen to him when he dies, what is the next destination. If he doesn't worry about that, then he has to take birth again. Whereas pure goodness is a Shuddha Sattva state which only is awarded to those who become a devotee of the Lord. What Krishna says, Mamevaya prapadyante, mayametam tarantite. As I said in the beginning, when our hands and legs are tied with the chains, we cannot open the chain, not even your James Bond. By some aerobatics, is not that he will be able to untie his chain and all that. No, nobody, no human being can do that. It can only be done by those who can set us free, those who are themselves free from the clutches of this chain or the modes. So therefore, Krishna says, when you take shelter of me, which means taking shelter of the devotees of the Lord, as Krishna says in 4th chapter, taking shelter of a bona fide guru. And when we begin to practice Krishna consciousness, then we slowly rise up to Sattva Guna, and then gradually the Sattva Guna acts as a springboard that pushes us beyond the clutches of the modes of mental nature and situates one in a Shuddha Sattva Guna. But it takes effort. It's not that easy. We cannot demand it. It is awarded by the Lord. Whenever the Lord is pleased, he will order the jailkeeper to set us free. At least aim to come for goodness so that we can practice spiritual life properly and live a happy and prosperous life by doing our occupational duty, having a good relationship, and making some social contribution to the society and have a happy life. So that's the difference. Sattva Guna, Shuddha Sattva, is a mode of freedom. Mode of goodness gives you happiness, but your hands and legs are still tied up. That's a major difference. Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, Medhavini Mataji want to ask you a question. Mataji, you can unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna, are you able to hear me?
Yes, please.
So, Prabhuji, thank you for the very wonderful class. I mean, it's always interesting, this chapter. So my question is, in spite of all the knowledge, right? So we know that, the dog that we feed is going to get stronger. We know it, it's all known. But then at the spur of the moment, I take the wrong choice. And, in spite of regretting later, I know for a fact that the bad dog is getting stronger by the day. But then at the spur of the moment, the choices that I take actually, determines, because the previous conditioning is so much that in spite of all the knowledge, at least I tend to take the wrong choice at the spur of the moment. Especially, I have the tendency to, control things. It has to go in a certain way, in my way. Although the objective could be whatever be the objective, but the process is also very important. So, and I know that I fed the bad dog and I do it every time, I regret every time. And then, it gets more difficult the more bad choices I make. So how do we first start feeding the good dog and starve the bad dog? Any tips on that? Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
So that's a practice of Krishna conscious culture or the spiritual life that starts with feeding the good dog. What is here the mother is indicating too, that there's a famous analogy, amongst the native red Indians, which means the Native Americans, where the saying was, there is a good dog and bad dog within us. What is this good dog and bad dog? There are two voices within us. Whichever voice we feed becomes more stronger. Good voice, a good dog refers to the good voice, refers to life of morality, and a bad dog refers to, irresponsible life. So the choices that we make, that determines what dog we feed. So the spiritual culture, if you see Lord Shri Krishna in second chapter says, Rasoham, param drashtva nivartate. Krishna says, take to higher taste. There are do's and don'ts in all yoga practices. So our do's and don'ts is focus on the do's, focus on the right activities, which means start focusing on getting up early in the morning, focus on chanting the holy names of the Lord, focus on eating Krishna Prasadam, focus on taking association of devotees, focus on reading wisdom literature. When you focus on the right things, do you agree or not, the bad things will eventually go away because there's no time. Now, it is not our effort alone. It is just not possible you sitting back at home all alone can think and act like this. Knowledge is not power. Knowledge gives you some ability, but when that knowledge translates into a wisdom, then it's become power. A classic case of Ajamil, which is mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam 6th canto, he had all the knowledge of scriptures, but that time that knowledge could not save him. He lacked wisdom. What is this wisdom and how do we get wisdom? The knowledge turns into wisdom only by the mercy and the blessings of Guru, Guranga, or Guru Sadhu and Shastra. Not Guru Sadhu Shastra, I mean to say, by the mercy of the Vaishnavas. When we serve is when we receive the blessings of the Lord, blessings of the Vaishnava, and that knowledge becomes wisdom. And that's the time we stop making mistakes in our life. So as you rightly said, we all have this conditioning, and sometimes this conditioning keeps haunting at us. Whenever these conditioning haunt us, this is a simple formula I generally advise everyone for that. You can ask yourself, what do you want, Krishna or Maya? Know for sure you cannot have both together. You can either have Krishna or Maya. And whatever choice you make, accordingly, you have to act. So that's in a gist of a question that you asked. So take to Krishna conscious culture, take to spiritual life. Everything else will fall on its own place. Hare Krishna. Anything else?
Thanks, Prabhu. We have question from Vinayak Prabhu. Prabhu, you can unmute yourself.
But I'm not able to hear somehow.
Now you can hear me?
Vinayak, go ahead. Our host asking to tell you, but he didn't have his mic on. So I'm just saying on his behalf.
Please explain me again. Actually, I have not understood one thing regarding the mode of goodness. That's a mode of the goodness people that doesn't have desire. I have missed some thing in the lecture. So how the
Vinayak, your voice is not clear to me. You have to speak slowly.
Okay, Prabhuji, how the mode of goodness people desires? How the mode of goodness people desires? Because mode of passion is
how do people mode of goodness desire? So desire is a function of an atma or a soul. Desire never ends. But the feature of mode of goodness is the person is content with what he has. His source of happiness is much more in refined activities rather than gross activities. For example, mode of goodness person would find joy and happiness in intellectual activities, in music, in poetry, in writing, in painting, in things related to nature like swimming, going for a forest drive and things like that. And that's where you find joy and happiness. The basic desire is to find happiness, isn't it? And that basic desire drives us. It drives the person goodness, passion, ignorance. Whereas the person in passion, because the influence of passion, that basic desire to be happy turns into a greed where nothing can satisfy him. And he thinks, until I have everything of this creation, I will not be happy. Even after having everything of this creation, he's still not happy. Whereas the person in Tamoguna, For him, the base desire of being happy gets translated into finding happiness in sinful activities. So the base desire for all three is same: how to find happiness. Depending on the influence of the mood, from where they derive happiness changes. That's the point. All right.
Okay.
Hare Krishna. So may I just see who all we have today evening with us?
Usually we have one more question.
Yeah, we can take questions also. And who all have joined in today? Yes, please go ahead.
Sudhir Prabhu, you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Sudhirji. Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, in your PPT, you put the text on your left side where you are.
Yes.
So we
Correct,
are not,
correct.
Don't, please just
The
request
system,
if you can put-
the system is still in progress.
Okay,
After,
thank you,
so it's still in progress. It's still under improvement. So this is
Yeah,
something which I didn't realize. After I sat here, I realized there is a new system now. So I
Okay,
didn't have the
Prabhuji.
time to change it. But yeah, your point is
Okay,
very well noted. Even I saw that. Next time I'll be careful that before the session starts, I make the change in the PPT.
Thank you, Prabhuji. And another one question is, can we get a audio recording of this program?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'll let know the host.
Only audio, not the video. Prabhuji, we can. Why I'm asking you is whenever we have a audio, we can put our mobile like normal music, and then we can keep on hearing, because otherwise YouTube and other things they have little issues with
Correct.
running. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yes. So I would request you to connect with the host, and I'll tell the host also of the program to connect with you. And whatever recordings you need, he can arrange for you. All right.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Sudhirji. So, is that all right?
Two more questions.
Oh, okay.
Prabhuji, Anjali Mataji is asking, what is Krishna consciousness?
Krishna consciousness means to become conscious of who I am. I am not the body, but a spirit soul. And to become conscious of our eternal Father and the relationship with our eternal Father. Who is our eternal Father? Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. And He is not eternal Father for me and you. He is the eternal Father for all the living entities, either with the birds, the beasts, the plants, the animals, and whatever species. And for coronavirus also. He is the Supreme Personality, and He is the eternal Father for all the living entities. So Krishna conscious means to become conscious of who is my Father and my responsibility towards my Father, or my to become conscious of His offerings, His love towards us, so that we can receive and welcome His love and His mercy in our life. And what happens when a son becomes conscious of his father? And for example, a son who has, consider a case, a son who has forgotten his father, suddenly he gets to know his father is the richest person in this whole creation. Does he need to work anymore? Not at all. I'm not saying once you understand this, that Krishna is your supreme father, you don't need to work. That's not the point here. The point is, at least you realize that there's nothing for you to fear, because Krishna is eternal, you are eternal. There is nothing called as suffering, misery, and all that. That is just the functions of the mind. So Krishna consciousness in one word means eternally blissful life, which means 3 words. All right. Hare Krishna. All right. So anything else?
Which is just one last thing. Shreya Deshpande from YouTube. She said, thanks. So devotee who purely loves Krishna is situated in pure goodness?
Yes. Hare Krishna. Thank you. And Krishna willing, we'll meet next week.